Hello. As you're aware, Omnisphere 3 has been released, and one of the features that matters most to me, in fact, it is the feature that matters most to me, is MPE, Midi Polyphonic Expression. MPE allows you to control the pitch and other expressive parameters for each note that you play. Let's open up Omnisphere and take a look at how to configure MPE. Okay, so here we are in the initial page. Go to the system page of Omnisphere, and towards the left you'll see the MPE parameters. All you have to do is click here to enable the MPE compatibility. Under that you have a recall mode. I'm using global, and I believe from what I've read that that's going to be the mode that most people will use. There are other modes, and I would encourage you to reference the manual to see exactly how those work, because to be honest, they're not going to be useful to me, and I'm not exactly sure how to explain them. So I'm going to leave it on global. That just means you're going to set this one time in Omnisphere, and every patch you load will adhere to these settings. The next setting is the pitch bend range. 48 up and down is the most common setting that you'll find in MPE compatible synthesizers and controllers. However, you are welcome to change it anywhere from 1 semitone up and down to 96 semitones up and down. Again, most will choose 48. Choose what you like. The thing to keep in mind is whatever you choose here, you also need to set that parameter on your controller. So on the Linnstrument, I've set the pitch bend range to plus or minus 48 to match the setting here. Under that, you've got your Y parameter and your Z parameter smoothing. So this is going to smooth out the response to these parameters as they are received from your controller. So now you need a patch that will respond to the MPE parameters. And sadly, as far as I can tell, none of the vast libraries of sounds that came with Omnisphere 3 have been set up to use MPE parameters. I would have thought that they would at least have a small library of sounds that are configured to work out of the box with an MPE controller. Turns out I don't think that they've done that. At least I haven't found anything to indicate that. So before you can play with MPE, you're going to have to modify any patch that you pull up to respond. So this is how you'll do that. So in this part here, I have the analog melodrama sound. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure I solo that because I have some other sounds loaded that I don't want to play right now. So this sound, let's see what it sounds like. Okay. If you want to configure the MPE modulations, you'll need to use the modulation section here. And as you can see, one of them is selected now. I usually don't use this view for mapping my modulations because you'll see if you hit the little magnifying glass here, it will open up this view. So this is where you'll choose your modulation routings and adjust the various settings. So as you can see, I have MPE-Z assigned to the cutoff of the filter, and I have MPE-Y, which is assigned to the rate of LFO number 8. And then you'll see here that I've chosen LFO number 8 to also modulate the cutoff frequency. Now, before we go on, let's talk about what these parameters are, MPE-Z and MPE-Y. MPE-Z is going to be the up and down pressure on the notepads of the Linnstrument, or on the Osmos, it would be the pressure that you apply to the key after you initially strike it. So the Z is the pressure that I put on the notepad. So I'm going to mute the Y parameter over here so that we can hear only what happens when I'm going to mute the LFO modulation as well. so that we can hear only what happens when I press up and down or press harder and softer on the notepad. Here we go. Now the amount of modulation is controlled by this slider here, so I'm going to crank that all the way up so that we can hear it more clearly. And you'll see if I play another note, in addition to the high note, I can modulate the cutoff of each of these notes independently. I'll modulate the high note first. Now the low note. Now both of them out of sync with each other. All right, so now we'll go ahead and unmute this Y parameter. And what that is the position from the top and the bottom of the notepad of my finger. So if I place my finger at the bottom of a notepad, the Y parameter will be a low value. If I place it at the top of a notepad, the Y parameter will be a high value. And as I move from the bottom to the top and back, that value will change accordingly. So I'll go ahead and unmute these as well. And I'm going to go ahead and mute the Z parameter so that we can hear just the Y parameter's effect. So I'm moving my finger from the bottom of the pad to the top. And you can hear the rate of that LFO increasing and decreasing accordingly. Now I will unmute the Z parameter and use them both at the same time and play multiple notes together so that you can see what the effect is. All right. Now, while we're on the subject of LFOs, LFO number 8, for instance, let's take a look at what you need to do to make sure that you get a separate LFO for each note that you play. In this LFO section, you'll see you have 8 LFOs. In this patch, we're only using number 8. But I want you to take notice of this letter P right here is very important. If you want to modulate any parameter of an LFO per note with MPE, then you need to enable this P button right here. If I turn it off, the response to my modulations will not be correct. So you'll need to turn this on. I assume that P stands for polyphonic. So you're going to make sure that this is enabled for any of these LFOs that you wish to modulate on a per note basis with MPE. An important point. All right, what's next? Another important point to make. The MPE modulations can be applied on a per note basis to only the sound source section of Omnisphere. So that means the oscillator, whether that's the synth oscillator or the sample oscillator, you can modulate those with MPE. You can modulate the filter section per note with MPE. You can modulate the envelope section per note, including the amplitude, of the sound itself and the amplitude envelope, you can modulate the filter and these envelopes as well. The LFOs, as I pointed out, you can modulate only if you enable the P parameter here. You can only modulate with MPE, I should say. So after that, and anything in this oscillator section, the wave, the unison, the FM, ring mod, frequency shift, wave shaper, harmonia, granular, all these parameters can be modulated with MPE as well. But what you need to keep in mind is the effects section cannot be properly modulated with MPE. Now, if I come back to the layer A and I go to the modulation section, I can choose one of the MPE modulations, X, which is the pitch modulation, Y, and Z. Let's choose Z. Now, if I have an effect over here, right now there's a compressor. Let's put something else in there. Classic tube filter. If I come back to the layer of the modulations, I selected Z here. And then for the destination, I can select part effects, and then I can come down to the classic tube filter, and I can choose the low cut filter frequency. And I can now modulate that with the MPE Z parameter, but here's the problem. The filter is at the end of the signal chain, and it is a single device. So you can't have multiple frequency cutoffs. You can't have multiple delay times or multiple resonances from one audio processor. They could re-architect the system such that in the background you would have multiple instances of every effect that you've loaded so that they could all be controlled per note, per voice. But that would obviously require a lot of CPU power, and they probably don't want to give you that option. I would like to have that option. Tell me, hey, the CPU can't handle it probably, but here it is. And if it can't, it can't. But as it is now, if you try to control an effect with MPE and you play multiple notes, the parameter in that effect is going to jump all over the place because it's getting multiple values at the same time for one parameter. And so it jumps all around and it sounds like garbage. So effects cannot be modulated with MPE in a useful way. You can try it, but unless you're playing just one note at a time, which may be the case, then it won't be of use to you in a polyphonic way. And maybe that's the way I should put it. Yeah, it's not that it's not useful, it's just that it's only going to be useful if you're playing one note at a time, which kind of defeats the purpose of MPE, right? You can do that without MPE. So at any rate, keep that in mind. Effects are not MPE modulatable. Okay, good. Got that covered. What else? Let's see. One little complaint. So since there are no presets in the library, the vast library of sounds that have MPE mapping already assigned, it would be really great if there was a way that that is already sort of here to change this globally. So these controls over here under this modulation on the system tab, these won't help with MPE modulation reassignments. What these do, if you're not using MPE, is I could take every patch in my library that has the mod wheel assigned to modulate something. I can come here and say, okay, well, I want to use a different controller, but I don't want to have to change the wheel modulation setting in thousands of patches, right? So I can come here and change the wheel to respond to a different controller. However, the system they have in place does not account for the new MPE feature. So this doesn't help you. I can't go in and say, okay, take the wheel parameter of every patch in the library and make it respond to the Y parameter of MPE. If I could do that, that'd be freaking awesome. But as it stands, if I want to make a patch work with the new MPE feature, I have to modify the patch, every single one of them. And, you know, it's not the end of the world, but boy, if they could come up with a way that they've already got sort of in place, and just add the ability to remap some of these to an MPE controller, wow, that would be great. So maybe that's something they're working on. I certainly hope so. Let's see, what else? I think that about covers it. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. But I guess I'll just show a couple of sounds and their modulations just to give you an idea of what you could do. I'm not doing a performance, just a sound demonstration. So let's go over here to the multi, choose the live mode so that we don't have to solo things. And you already heard this analog melodrama, so we'll go to the earth rumble. That's the earth rumble, and take a look at the modulations we have in there. We have the X parameter, which is the pitch. Oh, we don't actually have that mapped to anything. Never mind that. The Y parameter mapped to the wave shape or sample rate, and the Z parameter mapped to the cutoff. So I'll mute the Z. You can hear what the Y does. Oh, can't quite mute the Z because then the filter doesn't open up. So let's just unmute that. So the wave shape or sample rate makes the distortion, and the cutoff, of course, just opens up the brightness. So if I press with the Z, you hear the filter open up, and if I roll with the Y, you hear the distortion. All right, and because it's MPE, I can do that with as many notes as I want. Of course, this sound is not going to. That's the earth rumble. Let's go back to the watch and choose Jazz Cave. We'll come to Jazz Cave, and we've got the Y parameter on the cutoff and the Z on the amplitude. So the Z pressure will increase the volume of the sound. And the Y will modulate the filter. Okay, and then we'll just do one more, the dulcet voice. And here the Z parameter to the cutoff and Y to the LFO rate. Let's see what this sounds like. All right. Well, I guess that about covers the MPE implementation in the new Omnisphere 3. Was it worth the upgrade for me? Yeah, I suppose. I love MPE control. I love the expressivity you can get out of it. Next video, maybe I'll put together some sounds that are a little more musical rather than just demonstrating the MPE features, and show how that can be useful. Anyways, this is my first talking video on YouTube. It's not great, but, you know, I suppose I could have done worse. Thanks for watching.